Okay, we put out a video for Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, and my blood pressure pretty much went through the roof having to deal with the BS, the politicization of this, and the lies. But someone just sent over this. Apparently, Bernie Sanders is weighing in on the coronavirus. So, at the risk of giving myself a coronary, we're going to watch this. I haven't watched this yet, but I have a feeling that it's full of lies. So, we're going to watch this. But before you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button for notifications. So let's play this and see how long we can get before we have to fact check Bernie. Let's go.
That we have an administration that is largely incompetent, and whose incompetence and recklessness have threatened the lives of many, many people.
Okay, so right there, we didn't even get, 13 seconds before Bernie Sanders is making this about politics, saying that it's Trump's incompetence that has put many, many lives in jeopardy. Jesus, Bernie, we got 13 seconds. Even Dementia Joe got farther than you before he started playing politics. Let's see how this goes.
In our country. So today I would like to give a brief overview of what, in my view, we must do to respond to this crisis. First and foremost, we are dealing with a national emergency, and the President of the United States must understand that and declare that emergency.
Okay, so this is funny because when conservatives bring up how long it took the Obama administration to declare a national emergency, they get fact-checked. And the fact-checking sites say, whoa, Obama declared a health emergency prior, so it's just a technicality. But then when it comes to Trump, they actually care about the technicality. Oh my God. Okay, we're 37 seconds in, and I'm already feeling my blood pressure go through the roof. Let's keep going.
Next, because President Trump is unwilling and unable to lead selflessly, we must immediately convene an emergency bipartisan authority of experts to support and direct a response that is comprehensive, compassionate, and based first and foremost
on science. Yep,
fact.
Of course.
In other words,
okay, so what Bernie Sanders is actually calling for is an extra constitutional new governmental power. What he's saying is that the president can't be trusted with the response because he's inept and he's whatever he wants to say. So instead, they need to create a bipartisan task force that will control the government's response. He's basically calling for an end around the Constitution to take power from the executive and give it to, I guess, whoever Bernie Sanders' hands picks. This is insane.
Congress, in a bipartisan manner, must take responsibility.
Okay, so Nancy Pelosi was asked whether she was willing to do a bipartisan bill, and she said no. My way or the highway. Democrats have a bill, and if the Republicans don't want it, then we're going home for the weekend, and Republicans can piss off. Here, Bernie Sanders is literally saying the opposite, that Republicans need to come to the table and work bipartisan. Oh, this is going to be long. It's a 13-minute long video. We're a minute in.
For addressing this unparalleled crisis. Further, we must aggressively make certain that the public sector and the private sector are strongly cooperating with each other, and we need national and state hotlines staffed.
So the hotlines for infectious diseases already exist. I've seen multiple posts, not only on social media, but on YouTube itself. YouTube is putting out CDC posts beneath little CDC alerts in between, below any video about the coronavirus. So that's nonsense. But I do think it's interesting that a self-described socialist is calling for public-private partnerships. Usually that's what socialists hate. Socialists hate the idea of the private sector getting involved in these kind of public works projects. So it's interesting that Mr. Democratic Socialist wants the private sector to get on board.
With well-trained people who have the best information available. One of the aspects of the current crisis is there are people who are asking themselves, what are the symptoms of coronavirus? Do I have a cold? Do I have the flu? Do I have the coronavirus? Who's going to help me? Where do I go to seek medical treatment? How do I get a test? When is that test going to be processed?
Okay, so this whole test narrative, bogus. More than 1 million tests have been sent out around the country, and by the end of the week, the administration says that there will be 4 million tests in the hands of hospitals, and I'm pretty sure just hospitals, but also maybe state-run health departments. So 4 million tests by the end of the week. So this whole narrative that people don't know how to get tested, the only people who need to get tested are the ones who the doctor, a trained medical professional, recommends it. We can't just have everyone running in to get a test because they have the sniffles, right? If someone needs a test, they will be tested. There is no longer any shortage of tests in this country. Everyone who needs a test gets one. So I'm sick and tired of this BS. Oh my God, keep going.
People have a lot of questions, and at the statewide and federal level, we need experts to provide the necessary information to our people.
And there are.
People deserve transparency.
This has been totally transparent. Some conversations in the White House have been marked classified because they deal with national security concerns. But this administration's response has been incredibly transparent. Trump and Pence have been giving daily briefings. You've had the Surgeon General on cable news shows giving updates. You have heads of the CDC out there. You even have DHS giving updates to Congress. So this idea that it's not transparent, this is very transparent.
Something that the current administration has fought day after day to stifle. In other words, we need to know what is happening right now in our country, in our states.
Okay, so that's fake news. That was a narrative from last week, the idea that the medical professionals were being muzzled, that the Trump administration was blocking them from speaking to the media by trying to funnel all media requests and all media announcements through the vice president's office. That was fake news, right? The medical experts that the media claimed were being muzzled came out and said, no, we are not being silenced. That is not real. So it's amazing how they just recycle, how Bernie and the Democrats just recycle these talking points. They truly believe that if they say something long enough and they say something frequently enough, even if it's complete BS, people will buy it.
And in fact, all over the world, if there was ever a time for transparency and honesty and being straightforward, this is that moment. And we need that information coming from credible, respected, scientific voices, of which we have many in our own country and all over this world.
So this is something that Joe Biden said in his speech too. Bernie Sanders is mimicking what Biden said earlier. It's this idea that Trump shouldn't be out there talking because he's not a trained health professional, so he shouldn't be giving updates to the American people. And yet, he is saying this from a podium with news cameras looking at him. So when it's a Republican in office, he wants only the trained health professionals to be giving the updates. But obviously, he doesn't apply that same standard to him. If that was the case, he would have his own healthcare advisors up doing this briefing. He wouldn't be doing it. He'd be having the experts on his campaign briefing the public. But yet, he is the one doing this. Why? Because we live in a country where we have figureheads who are going to gather up information from experts, and then they deliver it to the American people. We hear this over and over again, but it's much more comforting to have the President of the United States give an update than some doctor no one's ever heard of and no one will take seriously. When the President of the United States goes on television and tells the big channels that he needs time, everyone watches. When the Surgeon General goes out on TV, yeah, he gets some eyeballs, but it's not the same. He doesn't get the same respect that the president does giving an address from the Oval Office. And also, I guess this is a good, since he's criticizing Trump's Oval Office address, I guess this is a good time to call attention to this shoddy little backdrop he's put together. That little podium, the two wrinkled flags, the Bernie posters behind him. This is Yeah, no, this is not someone who should be criticizing an Oval Office address.
Not from politicians. And during a crisis, we must make sure that we care for the communities most vulnerable to the health and economic pain that is coming. Those in nursing homes and rehabilitation facilities, those confined in immigration detention centers, those who are
Okay, so this is something we didn't hear from Dementia Joe. Bernie Sanders wants the government to make it a priority to provide aid and assistance to people in immigration detention centers. This is what I mean when I say that you cannot trust Democrats to push through their own coronavirus response bill. This is why you cannot trust it. Bernie Sanders is making one of the pillars of his proposal to be an immigration issue, to be giving financial assistance. He walked into this part of his speech about immigration detention centers by saying that we need to help the people feeling the financial pain. And then he pivots right to we need to help people in immigration detention centers. These are illegal aliens. He is talking about giving American tax dollars to illegal aliens because of the coronavirus. This is insane.
Currently incarcerated and in jails, and all people, regardless of their immigration status.
So, again, this isn't just the United States taking care of Americans. Now Bernie Sanders is saying that anyone on earth, if they come to the United States, should be giving free and complete health care to combat the coronavirus. This is the crazy that we've been waiting for. They've hinted at this. Remember that debate moment where they all raised their hand and said that that Medicare for all or that health care should cover illegal aliens? This is the culmination of that craziness. Them saying that in this coronavirus response, illegal aliens should get coverage, government-funded coverage as well.
Unfortunately, as I think the American people increasingly understand, our country is at a severe disadvantage compared to every other major country on earth because we do not guarantee health care to all people as a right. And as we speak, some 87 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured.
Okay, so this is, oh my God. Okay, so the United States of America is not worse off than other countries. You look at the map of coronavirus outbreaks and the pandemic across the world, you are much better off in the United States than you are in somewhere like Italy, than you are somewhere like Iran, than you are somewhere like China. Actually, well, I guess if you were outside of Wuhan and the other hot spots in China. But in the United States, we are doing a good job confronting the virus, stopping it from entering the country, and locking it down when we find out where it is. Yes, there will be more people who contract the disease, but him saying that we're in a worse position than almost any other country is just a lie. It's just a lie. They have mass graves in Iran, not because the disease is super deadly, because Iran has such a crappy medical system. They were not prepared for the massive amounts of cases. So this is completely bogus.
And when you are uninsured or underinsured, you hesitate about getting the medical care you need because you cannot afford to get that medical care. The result is that millions of our people cannot afford to go to a doctor, let alone pay for a coronavirus test.
Okay, so the Trump administration has already announced that no one will have to pay for a coronavirus test, right? If you suspect that you have that disease, and you go to a hospital, if you have insurance, then your insurance, if you're underinsured or insured, the insurance companies have agreed to pay for the testing, right? So that is a lie. That is a flat out lie. If you do not have insurance, just like so many people in this country, including illegal aliens, if you go into a hospital and need care, you will get the care. You will get the care. Yes, you will get a bill at the end, and you'll be able to negotiate that down a lot. Anyone who's ever had to pay cash for a hospital procedure knows that you can negotiate it down quite a bit. But this notion that people cannot get tested because they're underinsured or do not have insurance, again, bullshit.
So, while we work to pass a Medicare for all single-payer system,
not going to happen.
The United States government today must make it clear that in the midst of this emergency, everyone in our country, regardless of income or where they live, must be able to get all of the health care they need without cost.
So again, he's including illegal aliens in this. Frankly, this is kind of the reason that we don't want people in the country if we don't know who they are, right? We want to be able to control our borders to make sure that we're not seeing the spread of diseases into and throughout our country. Oh my God, Bernie. How do people vote for this guy? How do people support this guy? I don't get it at all.
Obviously, when a vaccine or other effective treatment is developed, it must be free of charge. We cannot live in a nation where if you have the money, you get the treatment you need to survive, but if you're working class or poor, you get to the end of the line.
So this is something that a lot of people have been saying. The vaccines that are being created are being developed by private corporations, by pharmaceutical companies, and they do have some public partnerships in that. But these companies are rushing to develop a vaccine. They're working overtime to develop this vaccine. There are costs associated with that. Yes, no one wants vaccines to hit the market and be thousands of dollars per treatment, right? But this idea that private companies, when they develop a vaccine, should be forced to just give it away, that all of this work, all this research that they've done has been for nothing, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And again, if you have insurance, insurance will cover these kinds of things. And it was Bernie Sanders and the Democrats who claimed that Obamacare fixed it, right? Obamacare is still technically the law of the land. This idea that there are still some 80 million people who don't have insurance, Democrats promised that they were going to fix this. They had the House, they had a supermajority in the Senate, and they had the presidency. And they passed a health care bill without any Republican support. And now here we are, over a decade later, and they're claiming, we need to give them a chance to do it again. Forget about the fact that the first bill they pushed through didn't really do a good job. Give them another shot. They'll get it right this time.
That would be morally unacceptable. Further, we need emergency funding right now for paid family and medical leave.
I'm going to actually, real quick, I'm going to speed this up because this is just taking too long.
Anyone who is sick should be able to stay home during this emergency and receive their paycheck.
So that is a much more complicated issue than he's making it out to be. Yes, that would be lovely. It would be great to get a paycheck and not be working, right? Or to be able to work from home. That would be great. But it's a lot more complicated than Bernie Sanders is making it out to be. And if this ends up being, listen, the federal government cannot pay everyone's salary for 2 weeks if they have to self-quarantine. That's not feasible, right? What we can do is we can extend unemployment insurance to people. We can give them tax breaks. We can do other things. But the government cannot take on potentially every single employee's salary for 2 weeks while they're quarantined, or more if they're sick. It isn't feasible, which is why it's not just something that Congress can just snap their fingers and pass. It's a lot more complicated than he's making it out to be.
We do not want to see is at a time when half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, when they need to go to work in order to take care of their family. We do not want to see people going to work who are sick and who can spread the coronavirus. We also need an immediate expansion of community health centers in this country so that every American will have access to a nearby healthcare facility. Where do I go? How do I get the test? How do I get the results of that test? Need greatly to expand our primary healthcare capabilities in this country, and that includes expanding community health centers. We need to determine the status of our testing and processing for the coronavirus. The government must respond aggressively to make certain that we, in fact, have the latest and most effective tests available and the quickest means of processing those tests. There are other countries around the world who are doing better than we are in that regard. We should.
Okay, yeah. So there was definitely a backlog in the ability to get tests out there into the marketplace, but that backlog has been filled. The shortage of tests have been filled. The tests that originally were developed had some problems with the protocols, with how they were being administered, when they needed to be administered, and when people would be allowed to be released. Listen, I live in San Antonio, and we had a woman who was released from Lackland Air Force Base, and thinking that she was symptom free, she went to the mall and hung out in the food court. And it turns out that she wasn't symptom free. There was a test that hadn't come back yet, and she was actually that she actually had coronavirus. So she had to be taken back, and they scrubbed the whole mall down. It was crazy. Those problems have largely been fixed, right? The tests are in the hands of the people who need them, with more on the way, and the protocols have been adjusted to make sure that everyone knows precisely what they need to do and when they need to do it.
Should be learning from them. No one, none of the medical experts that I have talked to, dispute that there is a major shortage of ICU units and ventilators that are needed to respond to this crisis.
Yeah, no, that's true. If everyone in the country has a respiratory illness, there are not enough ICUs in the country with respirators to help everyone. That's absolutely true. I mean, what I'll tell you though is that doesn't get fixed with Medicare for all. Medicare for all. This is what's funny. My dad was just in the ICU, and it was a crazy experience. But he's up there, and the amount of real estate it takes for one patient, it's tremendous. On the floor in that hospital that was just all ICU beds, there were probably 20 people on the whole floor, maybe 30 people on the whole floor. That actually had all of the equipment needed. Now that was a cardiac ICU, but the point remains, there are not as many ICU units as Bernie Sanders would want, as we all would want in this kind of situation. But you do not accomplish that by penalizing for-profit hospitals and forcing them to accept pennies on the dollar as payment, right? You do not get hospitals to expand their ICUs by also saying we're only going to pay you pennies on the dollar through Medicare. So it's backwards what he's saying, but he's right. There aren't enough ICUs. Yes, if everyone got sick, there's not enough ICUs in the country. That's just common sense.
The federal government must work aggressively with the private sector to make sure that this equipment is available to hospitals and the rest of the medical community.
So again, he's talking about Medicare for all, but now he wants the private sector to pick up the slack. Yeah, okay.
Our current healthcare system does not have the doctors and nurses we currently need. We are understaffed. During this crisis, we need to mobilize medical residents, retired medical professionals, and other medical personnel to help us deal with this crisis.
So again, if he implements Medicare for all, which I don't think is going to happen, he's not going to win the presidency. But if Medicare for all was to become law, you would see an exodus of medical professionals who are not willing to provide their expertise at government set rates. So you're seeing Bernie Sanders kind of talk out of both sides of his mouth, say that we need Medicare for all and that would fix all our problems, but also say that we need private health care and we can't do it without them.
We need to make sure that doctors, nurses, and medical professionals have the instructions and personal protective equipment that they need.
Yeah,
this is not only because we care about the well-being of medical professionals, but if they go down, then our capability to respond to this crisis is significantly diminished. The pharmaceutical industry must be told in no uncertain terms that the medicines that they manufacture for this crisis will be sold at cost. This is not the time for price gouging or profiteering.
Okay, so that's socialism. That's socialism right there. So everything you need to combat the flu, which is essentially what the treatment for coronavirus is, you basically hydrate them, you give them antivirals, and you give them nutrients. Everything needs to be provided at cost. Do you have any idea how radical that is? When he's saying that millions of people could get this disease, telling the private sector that they need to provide this at cost is insane. That is what, listen, this is what Bernie Sanders has been hinting at all along. It's not just Medicare for all, it's the complete socialization of healthcare.
The coronavirus is already causing a global economic meltdown, which is impacting people throughout the world and in our own country. And it is especially dangerous for low-income and working-class families, people who today, before the crisis, are struggling economically. Instead of providing more tax breaks to the top 1% and large corporations, we need to provide economic assistance to the elderly, and I worry very much about elderly people in this country today, many of whom are isolated, many of whom do not have a lot of money. We need to worry about those who are already sick. We need to worry about working families with children, people with disabilities.
Okay, so what he's saying about the 1%, and he's talking about the wealthy, is the tax breaks that are being proposed. One of the big ones is the payroll tax, which would help both employees and it would help businesses save money on their tax burdens. Also, some of the things being floated are industry specific. So we see that the cruise line industry is canceling cruises for a month. We're seeing that the oil industry is being hit by the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. We're seeing the airline industry struggling. The bailouts he's talking about are incentives and subsidies for these industries to keep them afloat, keep them in business so they can continue paying their workers, right? These aren't tax breaks to the 1%. This whole thing is not a scheme to enrich the wealthy. It's to keep the economy together long enough to be able to weather the crisis so that the companies can stay in business and continue to pay their employees. If these companies, if these entire sectors of our economy close up, people are going to lose their jobs. So saying that we don't want to save the industry, we just want to help the people, it's incredibly short-sighted.
The homeless and all those who are vulnerable. We need to provide, in that context, emergency unemployment assistance to anyone in this country who loses their job through no fault of their own. Right now, 23% of those who are eligible to receive unemployment compensation do not receive it. Under our proposal, everyone who loses a job must qualify for unemployment compensation at least 100% of their prior salary, with a cap of $1,150 a week or $60,000 a year. So
that's not 100% of their salary. So they're going to get paid 100% of their salary, except for the fact that they won't make more than $60,000 a year. So what Bernie Sanders has basically based his campaign on is the idea that billionaires should not exist. Millionaires should not exist. This idea that you should only make so much money and that if you make more than that, it's obscene and you're somehow taking it away from someone else. So when I hear this is like kind of like a look into his mind a little bit, because he had to pick a number. He had to pick a number of that's enough. And apparently 60,000, an annualized salary of 60,000 is enough in his mind. That no matter what's going on with you and your family, you should be able to get by on this amount. And if you can't, then it's obscene and you're the problem with the country. I mean, that's how I interpret what he just said.
In addition, those who depend on tips, and the restaurant industry is suffering very much from the meltdown, those who depend on tips, gig workers, domestic workers, and independent contractors must also qualify for unemployment insurance to make up for the income that they lose during this crisis.
So how do you measure that? How do you measure a contractor getting someone getting tips? If you're a bartender and you get tips, how do you measure what they're capped at? I know bartenders who, if they actually did it every single night, they'd be making six figures. Right? How do you cap that? How do you measure that? There's a lot of giveaways in Bernie's speech, but not a lot of explanations on how he's going to reach those numbers, how he's going to pay for those numbers. So again, this is what socialism is. It's a lot of pie in the sky stuff without a lot of explanations on how it works.
We need to make sure that the elderly, people with disabilities, and families with children have access to nutritious food. That means expanding the Meals on Wheels program. It means expanding the school lunch program and SNAP so that no one goes hungry during this crisis, and everyone who cannot leave their home can receive nutritious meals delivered directly to where they live.
Okay, so this is anyone who's hungry during this crisis. If you're hungry, the government will feed you. If you're sick, the government will take care of you. If you lose your job, the government will pay you. Jesus. You start looking at this, and the real challenge is how do you pay for this stuff, right? It's one thing to say that in inner cities, when kids go to school, the schools will provide lunches, and the schools get funding from the government to provide those lunches, free or reduced lunch programs. It's another thing to say that when they're out of school, that the government should come in and still be paying for their lunches. Delivering meals. Bernie Sanders is talking about the government delivering meals to everyone who needs them. What the hell? We are not... First of all, that's not a quarantine, right? If the government is delivering meals to your house, you're going to break quarantine in one way or another. But second of all, where's that infrastructure going to come from?
We need also, in this economic crisis, to place an immediate moratorium on evictions, on foreclosures, and on utility shutoffs, so that no one loses their home during this crisis.
So no one can be evicted, no one can be foreclosed on, and no one can have their electricity or gas shut off during this crisis. Again, going after the bad guys. He views these people as the bad guys. These are the banks, these are the landlords, and these are utility companies. They are seen as the bad guys. But I guarantee you he's not going to bail them out, right? He will pay for the employee renting the house. He'll pay he wants to pay their salaries. But I guarantee you he's not going to subsidize the landlord. He's not going to pay that guy's rent, right? So he's saying, you don't have a job, we'll pay you your income, capped at $60,000, but we'll pay your income. But, oh, don't worry, you can't get evicted, so you don't have to pay your rent. So what does the landlord get? He's picking winners and losers. He's already determined who the losers are. As I said, the banks, the utility companies, landlords, people who make a lot of money, business owners. Those are the losers, and the winners are everyone else. This is... they say that you can really see someone's true self in a time of crisis. This is a socialist wish list.
And that everyone has access to clean water, electricity, heat, and air conditioning. We need to construct emergency homeless shelters to make sure that the homeless, survivors of domestic violence, and college students quarantined off campus are able to receive the shelter, the health care, and the nutrition they need.
So now we're just going to build a bunch of homeless shelters, which again, sounds great. Who's paying for it?
We need to provide emergency lending to small and medium-sized businesses to cover payroll, new construction of manufacturing facilities, and production of emergency supplies such as masks and ventilators, a very serious problem right now in the midst of this crisis. Here is the bottom line, and that bottom line is that in the midst of this unprecedented moment, we need to listen to the scientists, to the researchers, to the medical folks, not the politicians.
So why are you giving this speech? So we shouldn't listen to you. What? I don't get it anymore. I don't understand.
We need an emergency response to the current emergency, and we need it immediately. We need more doctors and nurses in underserved areas. We need to make sure that workers who lose their jobs in this crisis receive the unemployment assistance they need. And in this moment, we need to make sure that in the future, after this crisis is behind us, we build a healthcare system that makes sure that every person in this country is guaranteed the healthcare that they need. Thank you all.
So that will never happen. We will never have a healthcare system where if every single American is sick at the same time, they will all receive care. That will never happen. It just isn't feasible. It isn't feasible. Oh man, this is... As you saw, I had to turn this on 1.5, 2 times speed at parts because he's just rambling on. It's a lot to go through. But let me know what you think. Because from my vantage point, he just listed out his wish list of pretty much every socialist policy he's ever wanted. Now they want to make it a reality, right? And he's even gone even farther with that. But at times, he was talking about things that are very unsocialist, anti-socialist, and very capitalist. Oh, duh. He was talking about things that are very capitalistic, things like the private sector needing to do their job, doctors needing to come back into the workforce after they retired. Again, he says they have to do it at cost, right? He wants the pharmaceutical industry to basically fund this entire response at cost. Yeah, right. Not going to happen. But he does talk about the need for public-private partnerships, which is very capitalistic and something that you would never hear a socialist say. So let me know what you think. This didn't make my blood boil as much as Biden did, because this guy is clearly, oh, look at his face. This guy is clearly just a radical, right? The things that he's proposing will not happen. He does a good job of actually presenting them, but it didn't get my blood boiling because he made it political at times, but it wasn't nearly as political as Joe Biden. So let me know what you think in the comments below. And again, remember to subscribe and hit the bell button so you can get notifications when more of these videos go live.